All right, we're live. First time in a long time. I set up this on pretty short notice, so I think I'll wait a little bit for some people to join in before I get to the main topic. I have been, oh God, just been heads down in this Project 2025 thing. Um, I promised everybody I was going to read it for them, and I have been, and I'm about 600 pages in, and I've still got about 12 different departments of the executive branch to go in terms of detailing out what kind of changes the Project 2025 team wants to make. Because the way that document's made up is they've got 30 different documents in there, one for each of the agencies that the federal government has under it in the executive branch. Real Nerdy Review says he's back. Yes, I'm just explaining what I've been doing all this time. Is looking at this Project 2025 stuff. It's a mountain of stuff, but I also feel like I'm learning a lot about how big the federal government is. I mean, yeah, you know that there's three branches of government, and Congress has its own stuff, and then the Supreme Court has its own stuff, and then there's the executive branch. The executive branch pretty much contains everything that we've ever heard of. If you're talking about the Treasury, if you're talking about the Department of Justice, if you're talking about the Export Import Bank. I don't even know if I didn't even know that was part of the federal government until now. So I'm learning a lot about how the federal government is organized, and man, it's huge, and I can understand why everybody thinks it's so unwieldy that it needs significant change in order to get it under control. So I'm I want to say I'm 2/3 of the way through the Project 2025 document, and I will be releasing a video on it hopefully this weekend, because there's only I don't know, 2 weeks left to go before actual election day. This may be a freaking moot point by the time I release it. This may wind up being something that was mainly for my benefit, just learning all this stuff. But other than that, I want to say I've got 4 books ready for review that people have either passed to me or I've got on the pile. And I know I'm still waiting for another copy of Liam Gray's Dino King to arrive. But I've got one entity one comic from Frost Comics, and then I've got some of John De La Rosa's stuff. I've got let's see, low watermark, $10. That's a great new mic you have there, Mike. Isn't it though? No, it's the same one. Like I said, I'm gonna get a new laptop probably this next month with Cyber Monday, and once Cyber Monday rolls around, I'll probably be getting both a new desktop and a new laptop, and all of the nice bells and whistles, including a microphone that goes with it. But thank you for the $10. So where was I? I was talking about Project 2025 and all that good stuff, and then I don't know, I got sidetracked. Oh yeah, I was talking about all the comics that I have to review yet. There's a company called Frost Comics that's asked for a review. I've got the next King of Justice entry from Andrew Rowland to review, and stuff will be coming, and I'm looking forward to it. I just can't get to it because I've got a freaking mountain of documents to comb through for this freaking Project 2025 stuff. So once I get through the last 12 departments, then I'll be able to jump back into the comic book fray again. In the meantime, enjoy the little shorts on the Cultural Bill of Rights that I think I've only put out like 2 or 3 of those right now, and more to come on those because I had a series of about 12 videos on those. So let's see. Let's go ahead and get into the thick of things. A while back, and this came quite a while ago, because I know that my live stream where I was talking about how I actually wanted the Rippaverse to fail is something that came out a while back. I mean, now people know that I've been generally negative about the Rippaverse overall. I mean, I've said that, you know, there's good things about some of their books, but by and large, they've been putting out some crap books. But at the same time, the videos that I was putting out for the sake of giving them, you know, something to work towards, to basically say, look, here's how you can perfect your books. Here's how you can keep the company growing in quality and then hopefully in quantities of readers, as opposed to getting a steep drop off almost every single time, which did not happen this last time with what is it, The Horseman? Yeah, The Horseman, as far as like going from Gooding to The Horseman, that seems to have been doing okay. And I largely think that's because Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett have their own fan clubs. You know, they're basically getting their own fans to buy the books. And so for the Rippaverse, you don't really need the contributions of a whole lot of people outside. So you got your base Rippaverse fans, which is probably down to whoever it was that bought Gooding. And then you've got Chuck Dixon's and Joe Bennett's fans. So they've come in at about 675,000 so far. And yeah, that's about, I was thinking they'd do probably 500,000. So the question is, why is it that I've jumped the shark? Rippaverse Goalposts put a 2-minute clip out on X from my live stream saying, you know, where I was basically saying, yeah, I'm at the point where after Gooding, I just don't want the Rippaverse to succeed anymore. I would like everybody to, you know, I would like the books that come out to be so bad that all people do is pan it and give it negative reviews, and then the company eventually folds. But Rippaverse Goalposts asked me, do I really mean that? And made a long comment on it. And I'm going to go through this comment bit by bit here, saying, first, you should make a video clarifying the statement regarding your desire for Rippaverse to no longer succeed. Okay, well, here we are. This is that video. Do you feel betrayed as a customer? From day freaking one. I mean, only from day one did I feel betrayed as a customer, because I open up Rippaverse, the first Rippaverse book. I saw number 1 in my hands, and I'm already seeing problems. I mean, when you open the comic and the first page just enrages you, because number 1, there's no writing on it. You know, no, you have a big splash page of people walking on the street and walking on the outside the police station, and it's like, I'm sorry, I think you actually have some time to be talking to me at this point. You could actually, you know, be telling me something here. You could be giving me information instead of, you know, having me stare at these, what we later turned out to find out were 3D objects that had been rotated in such a way that the writing was all blurred up on the 3D objects. Now, again, I don't have a problem with 3D objects or the fact that, you know, the writing got all blurred up, except for the fact that I tried to figure out what the hell those things were saying. And I'm like, you know, why are you doing this to me? why are you putting me through this kind of Where's Waldo kind of hell, trying to decipher the cuneiform that's up on the awnings there? It's like, just give me a freaking break already. So what I did was, so anyway, I saw number 1 for the first time, and it's like, oh God, this is gonna suck, isn't it? And sure enough, as I'm going through the book, I just keep seeing these little mistakes piling up and piling up. Now, it did get to a point where I thought to myself, okay, well, if this is as bad as it gets, you know, if you have just these little mistakes running through, and you are not going to compound this with even bigger errors later on, then the book will do fine. You know, the book will be fine. I saw number 1 would be fine. But things didn't turn out that way. What happened was you wound up getting into the realm of worse and worse errors until some of them were just downright laughable. Some of them were just downright, okay, hold on. I know Eric July has been a comic book reader for X number of years. How could he have let this get into ISOM #1? It just didn't make sense. And so, I don't know what kind of arrangements he had with Cliff Richards down in Brazil, and what he could do as far as getting redraws on some of these pages, but damn, you could tell that some of them needed them. So the question, do I feel betrayed as a customer? Hell yes. And then especially hell yes when ISOM #2 came out. Because when ISOM #2 came out, it was like, okay, you do realize that there have been all of these people handing you criticism all of this time, and you're not acting on any of it. You're not taking any of that criticism to heart. You're not trying to improve your style. Instead, you're like slamming all these different concepts and new characters into your latest book and just expecting that we're all going to eat it up. It doesn't work that way, and it didn't work that way. Half the people who showed up for ISOM #1 didn't bother with ISOM #2. And then half the people who showed up for ISOM #2 didn't even bother to show up for Alpha Core. So it was like, damn, you would think that at some point, Eric would turn around and say, okay, maybe I need to listen to some of the criticism I've been getting. But so far, that hasn't happened. And that steady downward trajectory has been, continuing all the way through Gooding. And the only bounce back that we've gotten has been with Horseman. But of course, like I said, that's because Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett, they have their fan base and they're able to bring them to bear on that book. So Zombie Boy says, I wonder what ISOM 3 will be like. So do I. Super Tizo, we should all want the Rippaverse to crash and burn so young Rippaverse can rise. That's right. The only thing that can save Rippaverse right now is a multiverse. And I'll tell you, I almost really believe that, because one of the things that I have thought for a while now is that it's not like the Rippaverse properties, the ideas that they are, couldn't work as movies or as TV series or something like that. But my God, you would really want them to be treated differently than what they are in the book. I don't think there's anybody who wants to see an ISOM movie where the ISOM movie is exactly like issues #1 and 2 of the ISOM comic book. I wouldn't go to see that. That to me would be an absolute crap show. And I would just not, no. That would be a waste of cinema to make a movie like that. Now, if they could take the basic core concepts of ISOM and spin it off into a movie that was kind of like Iron Man, kind of like the Hulk, kind of like, Spider-Man and all these other movies that Marvel made, and even some of the DC movies, something where they take the core of the character and then they actually make it into something that people want to watch. Yeah, Eric July could stand to make quite a bit of money off of that. And maybe you would see Rippaverse continue for quite some time. But you'd have to let go of that Rippaverse ethic that says we are only going to make the kind of adaptations that pertain to the comics. The comics are going to remain the core source material. Nobody wants to see that crap on screen. I'm sorry. Nobody does. Zombie Boy says, ISOM 3 should have been out by now. Instead, I think he'd rather do new #1s. The fact that he hasn't gotten ISOM #3 out is kind of a tragedy. Really, finish one story. Granted, there have been some done in ones, and I don't count Gooding among those, by the way. But, he really needs to have that ISOM #3 book out, because it's just hanging out there like a hangnail, It's like it's unfinished business. Business, yeah, I know. So anyway, getting back to what Rippaverse Goalposts says, do I feel betrayed as a customer? Absolutely. And it has continued all the way, kind of as a through line, all the way through Gooding. Mr. DJ Highfly says, to answer your question, knowing you, I don't think you want to see it fail. No, at this point, I actually do, and I will explain why. Rippaverse Goalpost asks, do you feel the books did not give you enough satisfaction considering the money spent? Oh, hell. Oh, good God. I spent, what, $50 for ISOM #1? Because, it's $35 for the book. And then it was tax and shipping on top of that. It was a good $50 for the book. And I understood at the time that I was making a commitment to a 2 or 3 book purchase then. But did I feel like I'd spent it was money well spent? Oh, hell no. No. There's no way to consider it that. Not when you have, some of those idiotic scenes. I don't have my copy handy here with me. God, no, absolutely. I did not feel like I had enough satisfaction considering the money spent. I actually had at the same time that ISOM #1 came in, one of my epic collections of the Incredible Hulk came in, and that sucker's like $40 for that thick, and had all those reprints from back in the day. And now, granted, it's easier to publish reprints than it is to publish a brand new comic because you don't have to repay the artists and writers, all that kind of stuff, except for maybe whatever their royalties are, and the royalty checks are not that big. But my goodness, I mean, I knew I was going to get tons more satisfaction out of that Hulk Epic collection than I was going to get out of ISOM #1, just right off the bat. Do I feel pity for future customers who decide to give the first handful of books a chance after they enjoyed the books of that time? Okay, first, that's a major assumption. Are they even going to enjoy the books of that time? Whatever their future is. I know down below, it's like, okay, 2034, someone goes back to look at Rippaverse of 2024. My God, if that company lasts that long, oh, that. The only thing in the comic book industry that lasts that long is like cancer. I mean, God. Oh, I can't imagine what. Oh, I just don't even want to think about a Rippaverse that lasts 10 years from now, because that is just going to be, I don't know. I mean, I know what Rippaverse Goalposts is saying, 10 years from now, they may actually have their crap together and decide, oh, okay, we know what we're doing. We've got some competent writers. We've got some competent editors now, and we can publish stuff on a regular basis that people are going to enjoy by and large. But yeah, I absolutely would feel sorry for them if they have to go all the way back to ISOM #1, ISOM #2 to get the first issues of those comics. And that's a large reason why I'm saying that I would love to see Rippaverse fail at this point, so that people don't have to go back to that original material and get exposed to just how bad the originals were. Now, Rippaverse Goalpost says there are large companies, and Marvel, DC, I guess some of the other ones, that had a rough beginning in terms of quality. That has not been my experience, though. I have not experienced comics that way. I have always found that with comics, especially in the Marvel comics and the later companies that would start up, not so much the DC, because DC had their golden age, and of course those were the days when comic books were still very, very experimental. People were still fumbling around trying to figure out, okay, what is acceptable to do, what is not acceptable to do, how do you tell a good story, how do you not? There's a lot of playing around in the 1930s of those companies that I don't even know that I would ever really want to go back and read the early Superman, early Batman, early Wonder Woman stories, because those are just so much a product of their time. But when you look at the 60s and how comics had developed by then, and especially what Stan Lee and the artists at Marvel brought to comics by then, at that point, when the Marvel Universe started and when other comic book companies started, especially when you got into the heyday of what would you call it? You would say like the I don't know if I'd throw Image in there, but I definitely throw Valiant in there. And then of course there was Impact Comics from DC. Um, you had some of the Dark Horse comic universe. I always found that the first comics were the best. And those comics would degrade over time as the creative teams changed. So those companies, most comic book companies today, I would say, start out strong. And then as their creative teams change, they get weaker and weaker. And that's even the same when it comes to like the DC and Marvel, reboots and rehashes and all of the ways in which Marvel and DC have hit the reset buttons on their characters. They have a tendency to start off really strong because they bring in somebody who's got a great vision for the character, and then it starts to peter off after a while. Now, sometimes you get lucky, and you've got like back in the 1980s when you had John Byrne get on Superman. He stayed on Superman for a good 2 years, the Superman in Action Comics, and then that got handed off to multiple writers, Roger Stern, I think, and some of the others, and they took that and kind of integrated all their titles into one large storyline that I think worked really well for a good long time. Now, eventually it broke, but eventually it broke down. Eventually it broke down to the point where it's like, I don't even know where this story's going anymore. But in terms of the early Marvel stuff, I'm hard pressed to say that the early Marvel stuff really improved over time, except after like really long periods, because I don't think that Fantastic Four got that much better over time until John Byrne took it over. And Spider-Man, when Stan Lee left Spider-Man, there was a noticeable decline in quality then, and that was in the period where Gwen Stacy died. And then what else? Avengers. When Stan Lee left and Roy Thomas took over, that felt like a decline. That felt like things went from super heroics to super soap opera, and I didn't care for that much at all. Generally speaking, when I look at my collection of early Marvel stuff, my collection starts at the beginning and then eventually cuts off. And that generally has to do with the fact that as they keep changing out writers, they wind up losing their way. And so I really don't feel like, it's not like TV shows. TV shows have been the opposite in my experience. When I remember Star Trek: The Next Generation, I watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes of that and I was done. I was like, nah, this just doesn't capture the same magic for me. Now, when they were in their 3rd season and Spock came on as a guest star, then I went and gave it another look because I just wanted to see Leonard Nimoy playing Spock again. And by then, the series had found its stride as far as the comic relief, as far as getting the uniforms a little better looking. They started to really come into their own. Same thing happened with Highlander. I mean, I think the first season of Highlander was terrible, and then they started getting into their rhythm, and things got better over time, and they started expanding on various themes and storylines, and made it more interesting. TV shows have a tendency to get better, but comics have a tendency to get worse. So it's not my experience that there are large companies that had a rough beginning in terms of quality. If you look at Comics Greatest World, if you look at CrossGen, if you look at Triumphant, if you look at, well, Triumphant didn't last long enough to get really bad. If you look at Defiant, if you look at the Valiant across all its iterations, they all started off strong and then fizzled out. Let's see. Shadowpunk. You didn't know the federal government is so big. Dude, it's a vast money-sucking pit of hell. Yeah, I'd heard, but it's not until you find out just how many departments are under the president that you realize, oh my God, look at all this stuff that he's over. Super Tizo says Valiant had a pretty cool reboot a decade ago, only to need yet another line-wide refresh reboot to garner interest. Yeah, I was not impressed with Valiant's reboot. I know what you're talking about. That was basically the third iteration of Valiant Comics. But to me, it's decidedly inferior to the original Valiant Comics lineup. I don't really give it much regard at all. I know they filled in some of the gaps in their licensing. They don't have Solar anymore, so they created Divinity. And, they'll have stories that go in pretty good directions, but I just did not really care for the reboots. And part of it was just because of some of the things that they had changed. Eric losing his hand like really early on. It's like, why would you do that to the character? That to me was just screwed up. And then you had Harbinger and you didn't have the original four come together all that fast. I Bloodshot. I just can't. I could not get into that. I wanted to, and I did try. I wound up getting probably the first couple of volumes of each of the titles, and I thought maybe Shadow Man had the best potential of all of them, but even that, after about 3 volumes, I was like, I don't even care about this anymore. Shadowpunk says, oh yeah, you pull them in with quality and you move the top artists to the next pitch. Exactly, yes. Yeah, you wind up, that's one of the really sad things is, especially when you get a really good artist on a series, that artist's art style becomes synonymous with the book, and then you pull that artist off and put one that's decidedly inferior on there. I remember the first time I read I, Vampire in the New 52. Oh my gosh, and Andrea Sorrentino, oh my God, that guy could draw. And then about 4 issues before the book ended, they pulled him off, and I think they threw him over on Green Arrow or something. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? Can you they at least had him come back for the last book to kind of touch up the remainder of it. But damn, it was just... See, Zombie Boy. Eric set a nice low bar to grow from. Yes, he did. Super Tizo. Archer and Armstrong a decade ago was so cracked when I was reading it. Are you talking about in the third? You're talking about in the third iteration. I think I tried it, but they have never been able to capture what Barry Windsor Smith brought to it initially. And actually, when I look back at the original Valiant, Archer, and Armstrong, Barry Windsor Smith had one heck of an idea to start off with, and then he kind of floundered a little bit with it, and then ironically Mike Baron took over from there. And after that, I just really wasn't that interested in the book. I don't think those characters were as imaginative as anybody really thought they were. I don't know about that. Shadowpunk says, by the way, love him or not, Eric July brings a huge amount of comics fans into Comicsgate. Whoops. Super Tizo, damn, I, Vampire New 52 was so top tier. I would have said so, except I just reread it recently, and I want to say that the first few issues of it were pretty good, but it started going off the rails pretty quick after that. If it wasn't for the fact that the ending issues tie things around so well to the beginning of the series, I probably would have gotten rid of a good portion of the book or of the series. But with that kind of wraparound, kind of paying homage to the beginning, it's too good to let go of. Super Tizo says that Swamp Thing and Animal Man. I think I tried both of those, but I didn't really care for them. And, the whole New 52 concept, that was was a bad idea from the beginning, and I felt bad for Jeff Johns when he had to just practically come right out and confess we screwed up with that one. Yeah, the New 52. The only thing that I think I got out of that, I think I even only bought 4 titles out of the New 52 because I bought Green Lanterns. I bought, I think it was the new Superman, and I dropped that one real quick. I don't remember what the other ones were, but yeah, the Swamp Thing and Animal Man, they kind of converged for a while, and I just didn't care for that. So let's see what if early customers had hoped for the business to stop growing and got their wish, talking about the earlier companies, then the company's popular products of today would never have materialized X years later. Well, again, I disagree with the premise. I think that the comic book companies, by and large, has started out strong, and it is because they started out strong that the properties that they developed at that time have continued to resonate. Eventually, it will become common knowledge which products to buy and avoid. Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm hoping is that it becomes common knowledge to just avoid Rippaverse. I mean, there you go. Most people don't care about a company's earlier work, but rather the current thing. Well, I mean, granted, but this is not like the old days where you had less access than you do today. Today, you get into a comic book company and you can practically either go online to the bootleg sites and stuff like that, or you can just find catalogs where you can find everything if you wanted. I mean, you could probably find most of cross-gen stuff if you still wanted to get it. You could probably find most of these obscure comic book company stuff, and if you can't find it in paper form, then you can at least find it digitally. So the idea, so what is Rippaverse Goalposts saying? So the concern of customers wasting money on bad items is invalid on a micro scale. Is the newest product good? That's what people care about. Well, sure, and I mean that's why I fear for whether Rippaverse is going to start getting good, starting with Horseman. Reason being is that a good title is going to carry along all of the dregs that have been produced so far. Your frustration is understandable because you got in at the start with ISOM #1 and witnessed everything. Yes, everything. You had high hopes for a promising comic book universe. However, is it fair to take that frustration out on the prospect of course correction towards a better place for the company? Well, yeah. I mean, you see, the thing is I don't want a false sense of legend to start enveloping the early crap that Rippaverse has put out. I don't want this to wind up being elevated, in a sense, by the newer stuff that comes out. Although I don't really have that much hope for the newer stuff. Remember, the Soskas are still writing Bloodruth. That's not a good sign. And then what's coming out after Bloodruth? Is it ISOM #3 that we might, ISOM #3, same writer as before, Eric July. That's not a good sign either. We know there's a Yaira #2, but that's also by the Soska Sisters. There's probably going to be an Alpha Core #2 by Dixon and Bennett. That's probably got some high hopes behind it. In fact, the only thing that I think that's really well, not really good, but that's good that'll come out of the Rippaverse is the Dixon verse. Whatever Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett write for that. In fact, one of the things that Chuck Dixon has hinted at that he's writing is something that's going to cover some of the history of the Rippaverse. Now, the fact that Eric July has not even told anybody a thing about this book is just showing what an ass marketer he is. I mean, there's no excuse for hiding this kind of stuff from us unless he thinks that his writer and artist are going to bolt at some point, Or maybe he just thinks that, well, I've only got enough money to come out with a few other things. I better not like brag about what all my other future plans are. I mean, the fact that he's not telling us about these things going out into the future that apparently these other people already know about is not a good sign. So let's see. The readers of 2034, God, I mean, just the idea that Rippaverse would last 10 years, won't bother with the creative problems of 2024. Are the books good right now? Right now in 2034, 35, 36, etc. That's what they'll ask themselves. And yeah, I mean, if you look at, I mean, that's kind of what you have to do with all comics today is you kind of got to look at whether the book you're reading at this moment is good. I mean, I don't expect people to pick up Spider-Man today on the basis of whether Spider-Man was good 10 years ago or Spider-Man was good 30 years ago or Spider-Man was good 50 years ago. I mean, you got to have a good book in your hands right now. But will they? I don't see why they would if you're dealing with a company that doesn't take criticism to heart and if it doesn't and it doesn't show signs of improvement. Lord Raptor's wheelchair salvage PI. Yeah, we don't even have an ending story for salvage PI yet. Instead, we got this Saoirse girl who's like, okay. So you threw out some ginger and some boobs and well, are you gonna finish her story or are you gonna go back to salvage in issue 3 and then Saoirse in issue 4? I hear there's 3 Fluorospark detectives who have lethal force certification. So are you going to have a rotating series focusing on each one of those in turn and just, keep teasing us along with short clips of their adventures? God. Super Tizo says, I'm done giving Rippaverse the benefit of the doubt. There are no good titles coming out. Well, and that's the thing is you never know. I mean, who's to say Horseman isn't going to turn out to be good? I've seen the first few pages of that, and it's I mean, it's good artwork, and it shows a fight scene, and that's it. I mean, that's what you get in the Rippaverse or Rippazine #2 preview. You see a fight. Okay, yeah, Joe Bennett can draw a fight, but it's all the other stuff surrounding the character that's going to matter when it comes to is this a good character or not. Lord Raptor's wheelchair salvage PI only has 15 pages and it's better than anything from the absolute DC universe. That's facts. No, it's not. No, I looked at Absolute Batman, and I won't say that Absolute Batman is great, but if you want me to choose between Salvage PI and Absolute Batman, I'll take Absolute Batman any day. Just because there's at least some sense of mystery that has some. It doesn't make me feel like there's not going to be some punch at the end of it. But yeah, no, Absolute Batman is greater than Salvage PI. Sorry. Super Tizo says Alpha Core 2 still hasn't been confirmed. They did confirm Horseman is now a series with a volume 2 being worked on. Well, I mean, I guess the fact that he was able to generate 675,000 means that's a good idea compared to Alpha Core. Alpha Core did pretty good. I don't understand why Alpha Core, well, unless it's just a matter of what they'd prefer to work on. I mean, I'm sure that whenever you're dealing with creators who have created their own product as opposed to working from someone else's product, especially when the writing of the product has been different between the writers. Like, for example, Chuck Dixon's Alpha Core and the Soska Sisters Alpha Core, they read like two different sets of characters. I mean, Braxwell, he's quiet all the time, so what? But as far as Valdez and Solari goes, I mean, if you read Yaira and you read Alpha Core, you're just going to be like, wait a minute, these characters are nothing like each other. The Solari over here and the Solari over there, they may as well be two different characters. And the same goes for Valdez. It's just pathetic that, how could you not see what Chuck Dixon did in Alpha Core #1 and realize, and not realize, oh, we better change gears. We better change the way that we're writing Solari here and Valdez here, because we don't want to be showing two different kinds of characters here. And I think the only reason they were able to get away with that is because their vision is actually closer to what Eric July wanted. I think Chuck Dixon was the one who took things too far in the direction he took them. So let's see. Do I think ISOM number 3 will be drawn, or will it have the same lame 3D drop-ins? I could care less. Really, I could care less. Honestly, Cliff Richards with the 3D objects, as long as they tell the story, that's all that really matters to me. I don't look at the environments. I mean, yeah, I see the same things when, he's lying down on the couch and he's not really making any indentations in the couch. I see that and I think to myself, okay, well, that was a little bit on the lazy side. But at the same time, you're showing a guy lying on a couch. You're not going for high art at that point. I think there were plenty of times in ISOM number 1 and ISOM number 2 where what he did told the story just fine. And if anybody was on the deficient side, it was Eric July for not adding enough words to his artwork. So the 3D object thing, that I don't care. I would rather see a well-drawn book with 3D objects than see something like, I don't know. I always think of Jeff Lemire's hand-drawn art because, oh, dear God. I mean, you get used to it after a while, but it's like you don't really want to. You just have to. I mean, his drawing on Sweet Tooth and Underwater Diver, what was the other one? Trillium, and just some of his other stuff. I mean, he can tell a story with that artwork, but it's not an easy read. Let's see. Shadowpunk says, if I made $3 million on a book, I'd shut up and take notes when it's criticized and keep smiling. Well, yeah, I mean, you can afford at that point to basically look like a bad writer who's going to get better. I mean, which would you rather be? A bad writer who made $3 million and stands to get better? Or, do you want to pass yourself off as a good writer, which everyone knows you're not, and then say, oh, well, my stuff is only going up from here, when, the second damn book you put out was a disaster compared to the first one. I mean, what? But the thing is it's all about the image with him. I don't, there's no real reason to go on the attack about his character, but the reason why, I mean, back in the day, I thought to myself, oh yeah, I would love to be able to work with him so that I could, edit the books and make the books better and then, produce a better product. But ever since all of this brouhaha and the Comicsgate versus Rippaverse stuff started, and I've gotten to see, what he's been saying, the lawsuit stuff and all of the BS back and forth, it's just like, I don't want to work for him. I don't want to work at all for someone who holds the truth in just about as much regard as Donald Trump does. And then, don't get me wrong, I'm voting for Trump in this election, but that doesn't mean that I think that he has a very high regard for truth at all. I mean, basically, the guy lies as easily as breathing, and I think Eric July has gotten to that point. And so I know that if I were ever to have to work for him, then I would be wanting to say things in public that would contradict things that he said, and that would immediately lead to friction and conflict, and I just don't even want to deal with it. Lord Raptor's wheelchair says, Trashcast has melted your brain. You only hear one side from an idiot from an idiot. Improvements have happened in the Rippaverse. Eric's writing has improved. Bullshit. To say otherwise just makes you a hater. No, bullshit. I mean, there's nothing better about Salvage PI or Sersha or any of that stuff that makes it any better than his original ISOM stuff. And certainly the writing in ISOM 2 is massive crap compared to ISOM 1. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It's just, I don't know where you think any kind of sparks of brilliance are coming from any of this stuff. And it's not like I wouldn't leave room for it if it was there. But I go into, I mean, just go back to my video on Ripazine #1 or on Ripazine #2, and I take those apart pretty much the same way. There's a whole lot of garbage there that it's like, why even write these stories? That's how bad they are. You know, why even write the salvage PI story? Why even write the Saoirse story if that's all when that's all if that's all we're going to get out of them. Super Tizo says Eric's writing improved only in Saoirse, and I'm skeptical he wrote it because it read better than his usual hibbity chimney. I don't see how, though. I mean, his writing improved only in Saoirse. In what way? That there was a little bit more of a plot? Because I mean, I will say that there was a little bit more of a plot to Saoirse than there was with Salvage or with or even with Isom, but it doesn't take much to throw a couple of extra things in there. I still felt like what he was doing was almost derivative of other books that have come out recently. Like, for example, Scarlet. I think if you look at Scarlet, which is in the G.I. Joe universe, one of the things they just had was Scarlet attending a party and, getting herself into trouble there. Okay, well, what did we just see in Saoirse? Pretty much Saoirse attending a party and getting herself into trouble there. So it's not. A lot of the stuff is just either derivative or it's dry or there's just no there. I mean, I'm trying to think of the end of Saoirse, and I just remember her bringing out a gun and saying, "Oh, the gun is the great equalizer," and of course she's not shooting with it yet. But I'm just then the story stops. Like, okay, and do I even care where it goes next? I don't see why I should. Same thing with Salvage. I mean, he runs into the ninja. I mean, I guess if I really wanted to see Salvage versus Ninja, then that would be an interesting cliffhanger. But neither of those characters are very interesting people. Let's see. Shadowpunk says, "Am I wrong, or is Mike Partika a story first, art second reader?" Oh, I'm very much a story first, art second reader. Yeah. The art needs to be quality in that it needs to tell the story. That's really, and the writing needs to tell the story. I mean, anytime, like for example, there's this book that I read recently. It was called Miss, and the book was about a woman in the Depression era who starts out as a prostitute but ends up a hit woman. And I just remember reading the story and thinking to myself, this is a decent story, but the art has deficiencies in that I can't tell a lot of these characters apart from scene to scene. And there are a lot of times where I don't really know where the action is moving from scene to scene. And those are the things that bother me the most. If you cannot communicate on a page where the action is traveling from scene to scene, then we've got issues. I need to be able to know, kind of at a glance, where your characters are, how they're moving in relation to each other, how they're moving in relation to their environment. If I get lost or if I can't make a map in my mind of what the scene looks like, who's absolutely terrible about trying to do any of that? Rob Liefeld. I mean, dear God. I remember when he's speaking of the New 52, originally he was on Hawk and Dove for DC Comics, and he did a good 5 issues. He wound up getting some complaints because he turned in some of the pages sideways when he was drawing the last issue of Hawk and Dove, because they were in the Chaos universe. And in the Chaos universe, he was like, "Oh, well, let's turn everything on its side, and then the reader will have to, read the comic like this." And the editors were like, "This is garbage," and they had the art redone so that it would fit on normal pages. And honestly, he shouldn't have gone to that extent. It looked a lot better just being read as a normal comic. But anyway, after that, he just lost his entire mind when it came to drawing backgrounds. He would draw these wide expanses, but then you would never see walls anymore. You would never see where the room ended or began. And eventually, when he came on to New 52 Hawk and Dove to draw that again, I remember leafing through the book and looking at the first few pages, and I'm just like, I don't know where the hell these characters are. So it's like, if you can't show me where your characters are in space and time, then you're gonna lose me. You're gonna lose because you're not communicating to me how these characters are interacting with each other. So yeah, the point of the art is to tell the story, just as the point of the dialogue and the text and the captions is to tell the story. That's what's got to come first. Super Tizo, Soskas were frauds. They don't know how to write either. This is true. Yes, I mean and the thing is they outed themselves in Yaira #1 because in their dedication page, why did Eric bring them on? He brought them on because he read Black Widow No Restraints play. Now, what's the problem with Black Widow No Restraints play? They didn't actually write that. They wrote a treatment that they turned over to Marvel, and then Marvel gave them writing credit for the book that eventually came out. But they did not write that book. There's no way in hell they wrote that book. Because if they had written that book, then you would have seen the same quality of writing in Yaira #1, which we absolutely did not see. So, and moreover, when they described the work that they had done for Marvel, they described things that weren't even in that book. And so, yeah, they outed themselves. Super Tizo says, it felt more competent of a plot in Saoirse, and his dialogue wasn't atrocious. It's not original, but for Eric, it was like him winning an award in 4th grade for his book report. Yeah, I guess you could say that. I just think that it started with such a fizzle and it ended with such a fizzle that whatever happened in between those two fizzles just really doesn't impress me much. LMAE says, hello. Shadowpunk says, what about Jae Lee? His artwork is a bit abstract and not exactly realistic. Yeah, Jae Lee, I didn't pick him up much when he was on, I think he was doing things for maybe X-Force or X-Factor, or I'm trying to remember what he was working on over at Marvel in the day. I know he worked on Namor for a while, and when I saw his depictions of Namor on some of the first few issues, I didn't care for it. I did pick up the 12-issue Paul Jenkins Jae Lee series, and I thought that was good. I think he might have also done some of some Fantastic Four stuff that I'd picked up. Now, one thing that I did think was excellent coming from Jae Lee was his 3-issue series that was supposed to be a 4-issue series, but it wound up only getting 3 issues on the rack. And it was Hellshock. And that came out in 2 different formats, actually. There was the first Hellshock and then the second Hellshock. And it's the second Hellshock that I'm talking about, where it had to do with a mental patient who was infecting a doctor with his insanity. Shadowpunk says his Ozymandias work is just gorgeous. Now, was that in the Watchmen? Was that in the before Watchmen lineup? Because I never read any of those before Watchmen books. Yes, before Watchmen. Okay, yeah, I never read any of those. I did read Tom King's Rorschach, and that one kind of left me feeling a little bit flat. Super Tizo said, Ghost Machine is 3 different imprints. There's no way you can't find something conventional in it. I don't care much for the Ghost Machine stuff altogether, except for Hyde Street. Hyde Street has some, both amazing artwork, and I love, just kind of when Jeff Johns can get you with kind of not necessarily a twist, but when he can dig deep into the emotional archetypes and things like that, those are pretty good books. I think I browsed through Hyde Street #1. I'll probably give that one a chance when it comes out with maybe the first trade. Because I suspect there's going to be a couple of Hyde Street one shots, and then there's the Hyde Street book itself. They'll probably all be collected in the same trade, and I'll probably pick that up. But I don't care for Geiger. I don't care for the Junkyard Joe stuff. I don't care for Rook. What else is going on over there? Redcoat's decent, but it's not. It's not. It's not great. I kind of feel bad that Simon Pure is hungry all the time. That seems like a sucky kind of condition to consign an immortal to. Let's see, how good is Redcoat? Yeah, I mean it's okay, but it's not great because he's not that heroic of a character, and it's hard to like the guy. I mean, he's kind of just a hapless stooge. Lord Raptor's Beetlejuice. So no Ghost Machine. No, I didn't say no Ghost Machine. I mean, Hyde Street I'll probably take a look at once it comes out in trade. But I prefer picking up volumes in trade, not just getting the individual issues. Super Tizo, I only care about Hyde Street from Ghost Machine. I know Rook is probably cool, but none of their other books I care about. Yeah, Rook isn't doing it for me because it's kind of you kind of get the idea. And he flat out tells you what the idea is in interviews, is that it's about somebody who, fled Earth to find a better life, and now he has the opportunity to flee this world to find a better life, except that opportunity gets taken away from him, and now he's going to have to fight for what it is that he actually has. But, okay, and then there's the thing about the helmets allowing people to control animals, or whoop-de-doo. It sounds more like a toy line than anything else. Shadowpunk says, how do you compare indie comics to mainstream in terms of writing quality? Well, I mean, when you're talking about indie comics, but do you mean the ones that are like crowdfunded, or do you mean the ones that like you're talking about Image Comics, or would Image and Dark Horse, would they fall more under mainstream? Crowdfunded stuff. Yeah, crowdfunded. The worst thing about crowdfunded is that they have no editors, and they need editors. They need editors in the sense of correcting some of their grammatical and artistic mistakes, and they need editors in the sense of the large ball kind of mistakes. Like one of the ones that I was talking about recently was Inglorious Rex #1 from Shane Davis. I mean, it's an okay book. It's nowhere near Rocky level, because there's things that he just gets wrong in terms of theme. I mean, for one thing, you can't. I don't want to give too much away. There's things that could have been tweaked to make the book better thematically, where it could have been more of a brains over brawn as opposed to just, fighter versus fighter. Which I think that carries more resonance just as a regular trope, if you have more of a brains over brawn type thing. I don't know how Inglorious Rex #2 and #3 are going to stand up. I did read Inglorious Rex #2, but without Inglorious Rex #3, it's not a complete story. So I had to order #3, and I'll, depending on how that lines up, I'll review those together. But I did find some problems with it right away, and that one of the things that I'll say when I do that review is you don't want to back up to a point before where your reader knows you're going to go. Because in Inglorious Rex #1, you have a main fight, and then the next logical main fight is this. And when you start off Inglorious Rex #2, instead of saying okay, now we're preparing for that next main fight, things have been taken back a step or two. And it's like they got to get up to that point. It's like, no, you don't want to put things in reverse and then have the reader have to, go get back to where the reader knew things were going to go in the first place. Lord Raptor's Wheelchair. You're basically a comic snob. You like very little. Is there anything good that came out in 24? Not okay, but great to you. In 2024? Well, I mean, do keep in mind, I really don't buy comics anymore. These days I'm buying Marvel reprints, and I'm always kind of looking for something good, but it's very, very hard to find it. I mean, the last really good comic that came out, and let me see how long ago this was, because it might have been actually a couple of years ago. Let's see. The last comic book that absolutely, positively blew my socks off, and I don't know if this was really the it was in 2021, was the cover, released on October 13, 2021. Darkhold Iron Man by Ryan North, and I forget the artist's name. Who is it? I really need to say the artist's name on this. Darkhold, Ryan North and Guillermo Sanabauza. Holy crap, was that a good comic. And it just came out of nowhere. Oh, fuck you. Lord Raptor's Wheelchair is like showing a clown face for me. It's like, what do you expect? I've read comics for 40 freaking years. and it's like, you have to really be good to impress me. So no, I haven't really seen much of anything that's on the great list. I mean, Jeff Johns had an okay sequel to Three Jokers with his Joker the World contribution, and Three Jokers itself was pretty good. I mean, I thought it was pretty profound, but at the same time, it wasn't as entertaining as it could have been. Yeah, it's hard to find good stuff these days. Really, it is, because there's just I'm waiting for that next thing. Honestly, I swear to God, I was hoping that Gooding the Polymath was going to be it. I was really hoping that Gooding the Polymath was going to be like, okay, this one is going to be the one that just blows me away, and it did, but for all the wrong reasons. It could be that Horseman winds up being the one that blows me away. I'm really looking for that one that I can say, this one's the 10 out of 10. I mean, so far, Ethan Van Sciver's Cyber for, if you look at my video where I basically did all the re-rankings and stuff, yeah, I mean, the Super Tizo says Gooding could have been it if they didn't cuck Mike by making it short. No, well, they didn't just make it short. You see, I wish San Antonio were closer. I mean, it would take me 5 hours to drive down to San Antonio. And that's where Mike Barron's going to be there with the Rippaverse. And I wish I could see him in person, because what I want to do is I want to say, look, I want the email where you sent your script for Gooding to Eric July. I want that email with the attachment, with the script, name your price. Now, it's probably all under NDA, so there's probably no way to get that from him, really. But honestly, I would love to see what is the original script that he sent in for Gooding. I want to see that script, in all of its black and white text glory. Because I have a feeling they cut out mounds of dialogue from it, because he's a very wordy writer. And I want to say that well, like I've said before, I want to say that they cut the script in half, and they only published the first half and called that Gooding the Polymath, and then the rest of it they either threw in the junk pile or they're going to come out with that later. But But I want to see that script so bad. There's nothing wrong with it. Oh, just, leave. Just leave. You are so freaking stupid. There is nothing wrong with Gooding, Mike. That comic sucks so freaking hard. That comic was so bad. That one got like, oh geez, yeah, Splatterpuss. Oh dear God. I gave it a 1 out of 10 for God's sakes. Primeral says, "Hey Mike, regarding the Ripazine stories, I don't really mind them. They're definitely a callback to something like the weekly Spider-Man comic or the Shadow Monthly. Well, I mean, they're just kind of little 16-page nothings. And I guess you can't really expect something that's in a magazine to be something, but God, it would be nice if something out of Rippaverse were. So yeah, what else did I think we're coming to the end of Rippaverse Goalposts post here. Does Rippaverse deserve more success? No. No, it doesn't deserve more success. God, it doesn't deserve the success it got. Jeez. Should Eric July have to battle through a difficult period to rebuild the brand and gain trust as a hard lesson? Oh, you mean like that would be an actual story? That would be an actual story he could tell. Somebody who had to battle through a difficult period to rebuild his brand and gain trust as a hard lesson. That sounds like the plot of what ISOM's supposed to be, but I don't think we ever got there. What does Rippaverse have to do? How would you feel if they never experience the consequences of low-quality books and start releasing? How would you feel if they never experience the consequences of low-quality books and start releasing one book per month, animations, and generate million-dollar campaigns again? Well, crap. I mean, just at that point, let World War III commence. There's no justice in the world anyway. Would good reviews bring it back? No, because I've already seen people doing, good and honest reviews and just basically kissing ass. How would you categorize the beginning of Rippaverse if it skyrockets in popularity with most fans not knowing about the quality of current books? Or I don't know. Do you mean past books or something like that? I don't know. Dark Age? The Dark Age. Rippaverse is Dark Age. Would I be saying, whew, considering how bad the books were back then, I doubt they'd reach this level of quality. That's impressive. Well, honestly, it would be impressive. I mean, if they were able to do that. Why I should believe they would be able to do that is just, it's beyond me. Because, that's... See, what do they have to do now? I mean, what is it that we're still waiting for? Okay, that's enough of Rippaverse Goalposts letter there. There's nothing else to it. So let's look at what's coming out in the future. Oh, Shadowpunk asks, if John Byrne, a mega talent, crowdfunded a book, do you think he'd make $3 million? In my opinion, no way. Right, because where do you where did Eric July get the $3 million from? He got a lot of it from viewers and his own audience. I mean, he had 40,000 purchasers. Would John Byrne today have 40,000 purchasers? Because if he did, then maybe he could get upwards of $1 million or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think, what does John Byrne do these days? I mean, I know he's done work for IDW, I think, doing some of their Star Trek stuff. But as far as Glenn Beck, Fox News, personalities sell books. Yeah, I mean, Berserker. Look at how much Keanu Reeves managed to raise for Berserker, and Berserker was okay. It's like Eternal Warrior with more electricity. It's not a terribly original concept when you think about it. Yeah, what does Rippaverse have to do yet? It's got to do ISOM number 3. Oh, Super Tizo says he got those customers for the first book because he pretended he was fighting a culture war and his fan base bought into it thinking they were owning the mainstream woke agenda. Yes. Well, yeah, it's kind of like every time that, people would do a boycott, BUYCOTT, of Chick-fil-A. I mean, that's basically what they were doing, is they were spending money towards ISOM number 1. And if he had put out a quality product with that, he might have gotten, similar results on ISOM number 2. Instead, he wound up losing half of his base. And regardless of what he says, I mean, that second issue slump does not apply in crowdfunding. That's not a rule for crowdfunding like it is in the retail comic book market. And Ethan Van Sciver has done an able job of explaining why. Yeah, I don't think there was anything in ISOM number 1 that was terribly woke or anything like that. It was just that it wasn't a quality comic, and it needed to be if it was going to sustain the kind of interest that would bring all of those different readers back. And there were a lot of readers as well who were more speculator than reader, and they just wanted to get their number 1s and sell them and move on from there. Honestly, I thought he was going to keep his readership base, just because you knew it was part 1 of a 2 or 3 issue story, and so why wouldn't you stick around for part 2 at least? I mean, there must have been a lot of people who just either really didn't think it was good at all, or they were just jumping on because it was a number 1 next new big thing and they wanted to have it because it was the first thing from the company. Dude, Comicsgate was built on the fighting woke thing. Yeah, and I mean that's probably why a lot of the people buy their stuff too. I mean, I'm not going to deny that, but do any of them really? I mean, Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog story is kind of a metaphor for his struggle against the social justice warriors that canceled him. I don't know if anybody else is doing anything like that. Maybe Cecil's Cash Grab or something. I'm not even touching that. With wearing gloves. Yeah, that comic is just like, wow. I'm amazed anybody bought those. You can't be against the woke agenda and then hire woke activists that are into piss, torture, incest porn. Well, I don't know. I mean, if it was just if you, it depends on what kind of comics they put out. But the thing is I never really took it to mean that's how a lot of the advertisers, and Eric July has said this too, that's how a lot of the advertisers or talking heads that he conversed with, there were a lot of people who set the book up as being fighting the woke mob and all that kind of stuff. And all he did is kind of smile and nod and go along with it because he didn't want to contradict the people who were basically selling his book for him. And I can understand that. But he never said himself that it was going to be like, anti-woke stuff shot through and through. And I don't understand why anybody would have expected it to be, because that really wouldn't make for a very good story. I mean, you could have standard heroic tropes as opposed to, the woke tropes that you see these days. I mean, God knows, you got like, what was it with the Tom Taylor on his end, and like her black bodyguard, her bald black bodyguard, as if that's not a trope. Was her wife and stuff. It's like, can we have any strong heterosexual women in comics anymore? I mean, I know that Batgirl's been in there, but how about some new ones? How about some new blood in that realm? That movie was from 20 years ago. Mandy Summers did cam work for Kyle and Dale, and it was their job pre-CG. Whatever. Oh, talking about the Soska Sisters movie was from 20 years ago. Yeah, I don't really hold that against them. I hold their crappy books against them. The fact that they could not write Yaira out of a paper bag is what really irritates me. That could have been a good book, and it wasn't. And I think they led Eric July on. I think they led the rest of us on. Yaira, ironically, it says Super Tizo, Yaira, ironically, is a straight hetero icon because she pined for a dude for thousands of years, missing his DK. Yeah, well, gosh, I don't know. I think she's probably had some from Solari on the side, slipping her the Solari. Eh. Yeah, that's enough to make Valdez vomit. God. Yeah. So what? Okay. So where was I? What does Rippaverse have yet to do? So yeah, slipping her the Solari. um. So we've got ISOM number 3. ISOM number 3 should wrap up the Darren storyline, I hope. We've got Yaira number 2, who knows or cares what that is. Alpha Core number 2, who knows or cares what that is. Horseman number 2, who knows or cares what that is. Norfolk number 1, that'd be nice to see that freaking thing someday. Bloodruth number 1, written by the Soska Sisters, couldn't care less. Will Gooding ever have a second volume? At this rate, God, I hope not. What else? The Chuck Dixon book that's supposed to be something having to do with the history of the Rippaverse. Maybe that'll be interesting. But honestly, when I think of the Rippaverse, I just get bored now. I don't really have what is it? Mike is doing the Great War, I thought. Mike Barron? Well, I don't know. I mean, if I were him, I guess it would depend on how good the paycheck was. But my God, I mean, if they carved out as many of my words from Gooding as they did from Gooding the polymath, which I'm sure they did, I would just be like, screw you guys. I'm just going to take my check and go home and write something that people will appreciate. I just get bored thinking of Rippaverse now. I mean, I'm not looking forward to really anything that's coming out in the near future because they won't talk about it. I just can't believe how bad the marketing is for them. It shouldn't be this bad. It shouldn't be this unentertaining to even think about Rippaverse's future. I mean, there should be like a schedule of books. Like, I almost feel like there's more excitement generating now over Yellow Flash's Golden Patriot book than there is over anything that's coming out of Rippaverse. Look forward to Rippaverse going away and Young Rippaverse rising. Yeah, that's their only hope. Okay, so anyway, that was my response to Rippaverse Goalposts. I mean, yeah, I would like to see the company collapse. I mean, I don't think they've got anything coming on the horizon that I absolutely need to see before I die. I mean, they definitely don't have me feeling the way that I used to about CrossGen, where it's like, oh, please, let them finish their negation war before they fold, and they didn't, or Defiant with Schism, or even Valiant with some of their stuff. But I think Valiant, well, they really managed to run out the clock for them. Triumphant Comics, God, those were decent concepts and really good stories back in the day. I mean, where will we ever find their like again? Well, not in the Rippaverse, not so far. So anyway, thank you all for joining along, and please do subscribe if you haven't already so you can be notified of future live streams, and I will turn you over to the good graces of people like BTM Reviews and Ethan Van Skyver if he's doing Trashcast tonight, and I will talk to y'all later.